Hi, it's Bonner again. So I'm continuing on this series of videos about learning a fingerstyle song. And the reason I'm doing so is because I think if you're trying to learn a fingerstyle song, if you take a methodical, systematic approach, you end up saving a lot of time and a lot of frustration. It can be a fairly quick process. So what I talked about so far is I've taken the main chorus of the song, I chopped it up into these three big chunks that seem to belong together, logical chunks as far as my mind is concerned. So we did the first section, which is a 12 measure section that introduces some different ideas. The second section, which is an 8 measure section, but repeats twice with a variation at the end. And then what I call the blues section at the end, which is like 15 measures or something. So we have these three big chunks. The next thing we do is we take those big chunks and we chop them up into chunks. So for example, at the beginning, in section 1, I start off and just work on the first 8 measures. Okay, so what's happening there now is because I'm only working on a small section, 8 measures, it narrows the scope of what I'm working on, and I start to pay attention to the similarities and the patterns that I see emerging in this small section. So I'm making it a finite scope. It's easier for me to get some progress, to get some traction and play the thing. Throughout all of my work, there's a key concept that I call time distortion, and that requires a whole 5-minute video on itself. The basic concept is this: when you're learning a piece, play the piece as slowly as you possibly can and still have the piece make any musical sense. You'll find if you slow down below a certain speed, the piece seems to fall apart. It doesn't sound like music anymore. So what you want to do is go down to that speed and then go just a little bit faster, which is an incredibly slow pace to work at. The reason is because your fingers need to move slowly when they're learning. That's how neurology works. I've done a whole wheelbarrow full of research on neurological learning and brain plasticity. So I'll summarize it briefly. Your muscles like to learn small sets of motions, small groups of motions, explained to your muscles in very simple single steps, usually no more than 5 or 6 steps in a row in each motion that you're teaching your hands, and repeated slowly and always repeated in the same sequence. If you follow those rules, you'll cut your physiological learning time, your neurological learning time by about 90%. I guarantee it. Anyway, so go slowly and take your time. Work on a little piece at a time. So now we've got these first 4 measures and we've worked through them, and our hands are starting to be comfortable with them. And then I've moved on and I've learned the next 8 measures or 4 measures, and I'm starting to be comfortable with them. Now, so I carry on and I've learned all 12 of the measures of the first section of this song. What you'll find then is because I've learned it in chunks, at the end of each chunk, we build in this habit or a tendency to stop before we start the next thing. So if I was to play, I'm going to start and I'm just going to play the 2 last measures of the first section and the first 2 measures of the next section, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. And then we tend to pause before we go into, because that's the chunk we were working on, and then we start our next chunk, number 2 again. Okay, so that's the next piece. So what I have to do now, there's a method to stitch these parts together, and I'll show you what it is. What we do, and I'm going to change the camera angle so you can see the guitar a little bit better for this section. Okay, so I'm going to show you this concept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the end of the first phrase and the beginning of the next phrase, all of a piece. And this is the next thing we practice, so that what we're doing is we're smoothing out the seams where we're stitching these chunks that we've learned together. And of course, it's an excellent opportunity for us to practice the piece more. When you're playing fingerstyle, you really want to practice the piece a lot anyway. So this is great. What we're doing is we're moving the focus of our practice around. It kind of makes it fun because it refreshes what we're working on. And this is how we develop a smooth, continuous playing from one section to the next. So here I'm going to play the last two of the first four, and right away I'm going to play the first two of the next four, and then I'm going to stop there. Okay, so what I want you to notice there is there was no pause in between. Now, of course, I've been working on this a little bit so that I can demonstrate it to you. Okay, so that's the strategy of what we do is we learn these little chunks, for example, the first four, the second four, the third four, and then what we do is we practice the ending of the first four flowing right into the beginning of the second four. And we just go through 2 or 4 measures at a time, depending on how much lead-in you need to smooth things out. And what it does is it breaks it up. It builds our comfort level with moving from every measure to every next measure, no matter how we chopped the piece up initially to learn it in small chunks. And the cool thing about this is what you'll find is sometimes there are natural breaks or little seams in the music that are a little bit tricky to learn, and we run into that in the second section, the middle section. So maybe I'll jump over to that and I'll show you how we can use this same strategy. In the middle section, I find that after every 4, there's a little bit of a tricky timing, and it repeats in 4s. So every time we're starting a new 4, the tail end of the 4 before it, of the measure before it, it's a little bit tricky to get into the beginning of the next one. So I'm going to move the camera back down. So now we're getting a little more guitar focus, and here's what's happening. At the end of every 4 in here, it's a little bit tricky to get to the top of the next 4. So what we do is we use this seaming technique, practicing the transition. So I'm in section 2, starting at 121 on the video, and I'm going to play you the measures 3 and 4 from the middle section, and then I'm going to play measures 5 and 6 immediately following, and I'll practice going through this transition until I feel really comfortable with the timing of the end of measure 4 and the beginning of measure 5. So here's what I'm talking about in this particular instance. Okay. So what you can see there is the beginning of measure 5 is this. And the timing is it's a little bit tight because we're playing a beat on the forehand in all of these measures. So I'll play through that again, and you can see how by practicing that, these 4 measures are going to flow just like measures 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now measures 3, 4, and 5, and 6 are going to flow the same way seamlessly because I go in and I practice on the actual transition. And here it is again. So I'm starting at 121 on the recording. This is the beginning of measure 3 of the second section. So you can hear how, because I've worked on it a few times and I've gone through it slowly and carefully, I'm still being a little bit cautious or a little bit careful playing it. I'm not getting a big gap between the 2 spots. So that was the concept I wanted to talk about today. How do we stitch the pieces together? So first we learn chunks, and then we practice the transition between the last measure or two of chunk number 1 and the first measure or two of chunk number 2. And what that does is that gives us an added level of skill with everything that we're playing, but it also eliminates any hesitation or anxiety that we have about the beginning of a next section, and it erases the habit we have of stopping playing when we get to the end of a chunk we've been working on. At this point, what we do is when we stitch it all together like this, we don't feel the need to stop playing. We just keep playing because we go, oh yeah, this is the transition I practiced. And we build up that familiarity with that transition until we feel really confident with it. So there you go. I am going to play the whole chorus for you, but I didn't want to do so before I gave you this very important tool to put a chorus together yourself. Again, please subscribe to the channel if you will. I have noticed a lot of clicks on my removing stuck bridge pins video. If you have any questions about taking care of your guitar, I have a really nice video on changing your strings. I'm working on one about how to adjust your neck relief, which normally I do in the spring and in the fall on all my guitars. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But if you have any requests for questions or requests for basic guitar maintenance kind of tips and that kind of thing, by all means send me an email. My email address is in the description, or just leave me a message, leave me a comment, and I'll make you a video, a custom video for your specific purposes, answering your very questions. Anyway, that's my lesson for today. I'm going to leave it there, and please subscribe, like, click on the little bell thing so you get notified when I post new videos, and I'll talk to you soon. Have fun playing.